you or hear you if you're on Zoom. So feel free to type any questions you have into the Q&A box on your menu. If you are on Facebook watching us and you're tuning in right now, welcome. You can type any questions you all have into the comment section. I'll be monitoring both of those areas throughout the class and giving questions to David at points throughout today's talk. If you have any technical issues, please feel free also to send me a chat. You can send a Q&A as well. If you're on Facebook, make a comment, and I'll be monitoring all of that. So thank you all for joining us today. And David, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
All right. Good afternoon, Sally and everybody. Again, thanks for joining us here today on the Virtual Plant Clinic. As Sally mentioned there, we really encourage questions. I always look at this as kind of like a conversation, kind of a discussion of kind of things we're seeing at the clinic, plants that might be of interest to you. But most of all, this is really your show. We're going to follow your lead. So by all means, send questions on really any kind of gardening topic. It doesn't have to be exactly relevant to what we're doing today. But just kind of stimulate a little thought and talk about what's happening in the garden. We are going to feature the summer flowering shrubs. It's been pretty hot and miserable around here. That's getting to be an old story. But there's still a lot of beauty out in the garden. So if you can muster up the strength and go out and look around and stuff, there's plenty of beauty out there. And a little thing is, you can plant in the summer. There's a lot of people that get concerned about that just because of, my lifestyle, meaning that, hey, I work nonstop in the spring. I've landscaped 3 different homes in the summertime because that's when I have time available. It's a little more stressful on us because it means, hey, sometimes I'm out there in the heat, humidity, or it means I'm just getting up early in the morning before things get too hot. But these plants, they're out here, they're sitting in pots, they live outdoors, they're adapted to it, they're ready to get in the ground. So don't let the hot weather stop you. As always, there is a commitment to watering with any new plants any time of year. That commitment is greater when it's 90 and 95 degrees each day. So it's kind of thing like if you're traveling, if you're going away for a week or so on vacation, that means either you to postpone your planting or you have a good friend to come over and check on things. But if you're going to be around, take care of them. Certainly, there's no reason you can't go out and plant them. And we're going to start this off with a little video. I went out to Michael Fay, who many of you know. Michael's been a long-time employee here. He's definitely into the plants and what he's doing and loves gardening. He's one of our buyers. He's out at the nurseries right now. They go traveling throughout the country. They're out on the West Coast now. Just got off the phone with them a few minutes ago, actually. They're out there shopping, looking, checking inventory, trying to find the latest and greatest and best quality plants to bring our way. It sounds like a commercial. I guess it kind of is. But there's not many people doing it. So anyway, before he left, I stopped by and asked Michael, maybe he could give us a little rundown on what some of his favorite recommendations are for summer flowering shrubs. So here we are to see what is on his mind.
Hey folks, I'm Michael with Merrifield Garden Center, and I'm here to talk to you about my favorite summer bloomers. So behind us here, we've got crepe myrtles. That is my #1 plant for summer. There is a crepe myrtle for everyone. We've got them in multiple different sizes. They have different flower colors, different leaf colors. We've got them in shrub form, in tree form, both single stem and multi-stem. I'm telling you, there is a crepe myrtle for everyone. My next favorite plant for summer is hardy hibiscus. They are so durable. They grow in a variety of different conditions. I've got some at my house that are growing in very little sun, more in the shade. My mother's got some that are growing in her house in full sun from sun up till sundown. They grow extremely fast, beautiful foliage, some with green, some with red leaves. And then there's a wide variety of flower colors as well. There is amazing hardy hibiscus selection. And let me tell you about hydrangeas, because there are so many different types of hydrangeas and they are such a great summer flower. They last for a very long time. There's a bunch of different types. We've got your macrophyllus, which are like your endless summer types, and your lace cap types. Then we've got your paniculatas, which are your more cone-shaped blossoms like limelights, little limes, bobos. And then we've got the smooth hydrangeas, which are the natives. Those are fantastic. Those are your Incrediballs, your Invincible series. Amazing plants, extended bloom time, and then when they're done actually flowering, they almost just have a dried blossom look to them. Great to take cut stems into the house. All right, folks, so that's all I have for you today for summer bloomers. If you want to see more, come visit me at the garden center. I'd be happy to show you what we have.
Excellent. So I thought I would just pick up where Michael left off and go into a little more detail about some of the plants. So we're going to start out talking about crepe myrtles, then we'll pause, take any questions you might have on crepe myrtles, talk a little bit about hibiscus, pause, take questions, and then we'll talk about hydrangeas and take questions. So that's kind of my format for the day. And like I said, that can change in an instant based on whatever you want to talk about. So I am going to, again, go back here to start with some of my pictures and talk to you a little bit about crepe myrtles. It seems odd to be looking at a winter picture, but when you bring up the topic of crepe myrtles, first thing I think about is a long time ago when I started out kind of my gardening, and I've born and raised and lived in this area all my life. You go back 40 years, 50 years, 50 years ago, crepe myrtle was not really a winter hardy plant for us. What would happen, we were pushing the limits on its cold hardiness up here in the DC region. And we had crepe myrtles, we would plant them, they would grow them, but it was kind of a common occurrence that they would actually freeze out in the winter times. And so they die back and then have to grow back from the roots each year. So it was a plant that was in our landscapes, but not super popular and considered kind of just a very interesting plant. Really, it was a southern plant. But it was through breeding efforts at the National Arboretum primarily, they saw the potential of crepe myrtles in a landscape, and they started a hybridization program down there, specifically looking at winter hardiness, also evaluating other factors like the size, the colors, exfoliating, peeling bark, disease resistance. I mean, they're looking at all these different factors. But out of that breeding program initiated a lot of hybrids that proved to be reliably winter hardy up in our zone. So winter was the real challenge, but now that's not a concern for us. And so I thought, hey, this is crepe myrtle. Obviously, it's a variety called Natchez. It's one of the bigger, larger tree forms of it. And one of the things that's great is crepe myrtle. We're talking about the flowers, but it's a plant that has a distinctive form. Some of them have peeling, exfoliating bark. So it's really a tree that gives us interest throughout the entire season. There are so many varieties that have been developed, and I can't even begin to keep up with any of them. So that's why the one that's marked Sue is kind of a question mark. I think that's the variety on it. That's more of an intermediate, kind of a deep pink coloration in there. And this multi-stem form that you see is kind of its normal growth habit. It is considered a tree because they'll get large, but they tend to have this sort of shrubby appearance. The white ones that you see, the Natchez, again, that's the same tree that we saw in the winter image, but this is down at Lewis Ginter Botanical Gardens where they have pruned those into a single trunk. That's not their normal growth habit, but the nurseries train that, so it can be used sort of a medium-sized flowering tree and easily even big enough to put seeding under. So I'm showing you this just to re-emphasize a lot of what Michael was talking about, the versatility and adaptability of this plant. And then proceeding from there, of course, there's now even shrub forms. This one's called Pocomoke. It was probably the first of the kind of miniatures that were introduced. And now we have some that even stay smaller. So again, truly versatile, adaptable tree. They bloom kind of a sort of a July, August, September time period, depending on the exact varieties. The one thing I'll say is that they really need full sun. You know, a crepe myrtle, I want to see at least 5 or 6 hours direct sun on there if you want to get good flowering on it. If that plant begins to move back into shaded environments, then their flowering diminishes. And that's probably one of the most frequent things that we encounter on it is why isn't it blooming? And oftentimes that's because surrounding vegetation has grown, it's overtaken it, or it's just not getting quite as much sunlight. Very heat and drought tolerant. Like I say, these are native to India and parts of the world that gets a lot hotter than drier than just here. But again, that's after they get established. Because this is the plant clinic, I wanted to bring up a couple pest issues. Every plant out there is subject to some kind of insect disease or pest, and that's really where, I kind of get keyed in on. People will come to us at the clinic and they start to see this blackened look. You can see a little bit of it on the leaves in that picture on my left, and you can see it on the bark. This kind of black sooty look in there is called black sooty mold, very descriptive term on. The sooty mold by itself is not a pathogen. It's not feeding off the tree. It's growing on the plant, but more specifically, it's growing on this sticky residue that's produced by several different insects. What we refer to as piercing sucking insects. These are things like aphids and scale predominantly. They put their mouth into the vascular tree. It's like a little stylet. They poke that into the vascular tissue and they start sucking sap, sucking the juice out, we call the phloem, the tissue where the nutrients pass. And as they're sucking all the juices out of the plant for their nutrition, they excrete this sticky residue, this honeydew, and then the black mold starts growing. And then the customers, the consumer, you've got there saying, wow, my tree's all black and gross looking. And then that tells us, okay, we're dealing most likely with a piercing sucking insect. And following that story along, that comes down to, there is a crepe myrtle aphid. So they are very tiny. This image right here, what happens is aphids, they predominantly are feeding in the new growth in the tips. They feed on the underside of the leaf, and they're kind of a very light pale green, almost the same color as the foliage. So they can be difficult to see. But each time that aphid grows, each time it expands, it molts, and its outer cuticle layer, its skin peels off, and it also gets stuck in the goo that's being produced by it. So these little white specks that you see in there, those are the cast skins, or I call the skin peelings, they're called in there. So this is how we deal with aphids. We look at it and say, wow, man, you see they're messy. They leave the cast skins. If you look on the undersides, you can see them. The sooty mold follows them. And there's many different types of aphids out there. This is a crepe myrtle aphid, which is different from the aphid that's on your rose, which is different from the aphids might be on your milkweed, which is different from the aphids that you might find on your tomatoes and so on. Very host specific. Now this one over on my right, where you see the little white blotches, that's starting to come into our clinics now. And this is what's called a crepe myrtle bark aphid. They will go to other plants, but it's highly unusual. To date, we've really only found this on aphids. I mean, on the, on the crepe myrtle. This is it's an introduced pest. It comes from Korea, basically. It was discovered down in Texas back in 2004. And it's slowly been creeping its way up here north, and it's now spread into Virginia, Maryland, Delaware. So this is kind of a newly emerging pest for us, which is one of the reasons I'm talking to you about it, because we are receiving these samples at the clinics and people saying, I've never seen this before. And I'm like, well, that's because it's new, or certainly new to our region. Unfortunately, it's going to continue to spread because these guys go up into frigid, cold mountains and in parts of Korea where they find it. So cold weather's not going to stop them. They'll spread. Just like the aphid, it's sitting there, it's sucking sap out, it's creating this honeydew, and it's leading to this kind of sticky stuff. It covers itself with this kind of white waxy material. Is what we refer to as a felt scale. So it's this kind of felty appearance, and this is what they would look like right now if you were going poking around looking for them in your garden. Little bit of good news on that horizon, on that scene. One is aphids, ladybugs. Ladybugs are good predators on these guys. So one strategy or approach might be to introduce ladybugs into your garden. These are natural predators. They go climbing up into the tree canopy, and wherever they can find the aphids, or if they find the immature scale, they will eat them and devour them. So that's a great natural control, and hopefully we even have ladybugs in the environment. They're helping with that just naturally through biological control. Now that by itself, if you've got a heavy infestation, it's probably not going to totally control the problem, because both the aphids and the scale pests have a very high reproductive rate, and eventually it's, they're probably going to overwhelm the ladybugs, but that is something that might be out there for you. Even some of the softer products, I say, like insecticidal soap, horticultural oils, can help. They work, but there's a limitation that goes particularly with that scale insect, because one of the reasons we plant crepe myrtles is that peeling, exfoliating bark, but the scale get up under there, they're hiding under there. So even when you're spraying the tree, they still have so many hiding spots, you didn't totally control the problem. If it gets to be extensive and you feel like you need to kind of go in there, sort of call the heavy hitters, then we can do a systemic drench. This is an insecticide that we put down in the soil. We soak it down into the ground. It's absorbed up through the roots of the tree, and gets into every nook and cranny, and it works well. So yeah, there's some pest problems out there, but we do have some effective controls. And I want to see if we've got any questions about crepe myrtles before we continue.
Hey, David, we do. We have some questions. So the first one is one that I was actually figured we'd get. Well, the first is, when is the best time to actually prune the crepe myrtle?
I was almost going to put that in my little video clip, but I just timed
It's a popular question for us, I know.
So here's the deal. The best time to prune crepe myrtles while they're dormant, I'm going to say kind of a February, March period. This past year, I think in March, I made a video of before and after, and I've been taking pictures of that crepe myrtle, so it's in full bloom. So we'll talk about that when the time comes. But right now, I mean, you could do a little bit of pruning, but they're in their full peak bloom. It's best you just enjoy the flowers. When it's done flowering, some people like to deadhead them. This is totally optional. The plant doesn't require it, but you'll get these big seed capsules. They're kind of woody, a little bit unsightly. So some people like to go in and deadhead them after they flowered. Otherwise, I just say, just leave them alone, and we'll talk about that probably in March.
Sounds great. Thank you. Okay, the next question is from someone on Facebook. They have been getting the black leaf disease on their crepe myrtles. And they've been using copper fungicide, and it helps for a while, but then it comes back. And so they have very few blooms on their tree. So they wanted to know if you had any recommendations off the bat.
Yeah, so you need to go out there and do some inspection. It's going to be either the crepe myrtle aphid or the crepe myrtle bark scale that's causing that problem. So copper is not really the appropriate treatment, because you're essentially treating the symptoms, but you're not really getting to the root to the cause of it. As I said, you've got some options that are in there. If you choose to, again, I'll just show this product. This is a systemic product that we have. It's just called Tree and Shrub Drench. This is one that you can put in a watering can. You soak it into the soil. It's absorbed up in there. It works on the aphids and the bark scale. But what we really do like is for you to bring samples of the plant, or really good pictures, bring that into the clinic, let us get a confirmation on that and go through the details on it. But yeah, copper's not going to help you. We're going to actually need to go after either the aphid or the scale.
Okay, thank you. And I would just remind anybody who's asking questions about that, if you need more follow-up, please feel free to check in with us after class, because we can have David or another member of our plant clinic can assist. All right, next question is about the ladybugs. We've had a few come in about those. So I know we sell the ladybugs. First question is, are they native ladybugs to North America? And the second question is, do they come in the larval stage or the adult stage?
Let me begin by saying, first of all, please, if you're coming for ladybugs, always call the store, call location first to make sure we have them in stock. The availability on ladybugs is very hit or miss. Sometimes if the temperatures are too hot, they won't ship them to us. Sometimes if it's too cold, they won't ship them to us. So when they come to us from California. So they're raised in California. I'm pretty sure this is our native species, the native one that's coming from California. And they are shipped live. We then have to put them in a refrigerator to keep them in kind of a resting state. Don't know if you can see it here. You can see them crawling around in there. That's because I brought them onto the TV show. As it warms up, they become active and moving around. You can see them in there. I think there's about 300 of them in each can. They're to be released in the evening. When they come out of this can, the first thing is they're dehydrated. They want something to drink. So what I like to do is lightly mist. Let's say I've got Crape Myrtle with aphids. I lightly mist the Crape Myrtle. So when I release them in the evening, they come crawling out of there. They go over, they rehydrate themselves, drinking up these little droplets of water. And then they start searching for food, which are the aphids, or the bark scale crawlers. I pretend this is like having a guest at your house. Hey, once they've had plenty to eat, plenty to drink, if there's no food for them, they move on, they fly away. But if we're successful, they will have mated, laid some eggs, and continue to perpetuate there in your garden. So that's our ladybug story.
Thank you, David. All right, so we've got a lot of questions coming in, so just let me know when you're ready to move on to the next topic, because we could keep going for a while on Crape Myrtles.
Yeah, not get to the other topics too. That's fine.
Sounds good. All right. So just let me know when you're ready. But here's the next question, which is a fun one. So this person loves the look of Crape Myrtles, but they have them planted around their patio and the blooms fall everywhere and stain the stone. Do you have any suggestions for that? She's wondering if you can even like reduce the number of blooms on the tree. Would you just go deadhead them when they're done?
No, but that's just, hey, that's the way it is. Yeah, I have people plant them around their swimming pool, and then like I said, you get a storm or when the flowers fade and drop and they end up in the pool, that becomes a nuisance. There's not a whole lot you can do about that. It's just the nature of the plant. One of the plants, and then we'll talk about this we leave, they're like over my shoulders, these Crape Myrtles, these paniculata hydrangeas. They might be an alternative for you. You get a lot of the same effect from them without that habit of dropping all the flowers on there. But we'll talk about them in a little more detail.
Thanks, David. All right, we've got another question. We've got some more questions about pruning, more details. So if you're good, it sounds like maybe come back to that in March. We'll get
I'd rather not. The pruning, like I said, we don't have time to talk about that, and we're going to cover all that when the time comes.
Sounds great.
Like February, March.
All right, yeah, so that's a winter thing. So we will come back to that in due time. David, are there any new types of Crape Myrtle that you're especially excited about that Merrifield has?
You know, one of the things that I'm really, really enjoying is there's some of them that come out with literally almost black leaves. There's a whole series, I think, called like Black Diamond or something, and there's colors that go from pink to white and shades in there. So they've really kind of gone, I think, as far as you can in height, size, color. And so now the effort is towards getting some different leaf colors in there. We've been selling for a few years. I was always a little skeptical. I like to see how they do with their winter hardiness. They're holding up through the winter. That's not an issue. Occasionally I see a little more mildew on them, and that's kind of it doesn't hurt the plant, but detracts a little bit. It's still, I think, worthy of looking at some of these that have the really dark colored leaves. And you know what, Sal, because I'm looking at my time, I want to go forward here and talk a little bit
Definitely
about some other plants.
All right, thanks.
I'm going to I hate to do this, but I'm thinking I might even just skip over hydrangeas. And that's, a shame, because I'm getting my plants mixed up, guys. I'm thinking too much here at once. I was going to say, I think I might skip over the hibiscus. Michael had talked about the hardy hibiscus. Wonderful, beautiful, in bloom right now. I was going to show you, this is kind of our native one and the environment it grows in. There's also a hibiscus that's a tropical hibiscus that gets these kind of yellows and oranges and reds, but not winter or hardy in our area. And then there's a rose of Sharon, which is a winter hardy shrub top hibiscus that goes more in the pinks, whites, even almost a blue color. In the interest of time, though, I want to talk a little bit more about hydrangeas, because I know there's going to be more than we can cover there. two of the plants that Michael had mentioned in there. One is this panicle hydrangea. This is in the background. Panicle hydrangea, it's the large upright blooms on there. They are coming into their peak flower right now. They're sort of a July, August into September bloom period. And these guys, again, they can get to be quite large. And I've got pictures to show that. Down in the foreground, this guy right here is the big leaf hydrangea or Hydrangea macrophylla. It's a totally different beast. It's blooming. It grows the round flowers, softball-sized flowers that are pink or blue, has different pruning requirements. They start blooming a little bit earlier and does better in a little more shade. So we'll talk about these, but two different plants. To start out though, this panicle hydrangea, many of you know this as what's called PG hydrangea. That's Hydrangea paniculata grandiflora, so that's the PG. This is an old-fashioned plant, but was hugely popular. I still remember even growing in my grandparents' yard. They had one, just like this one. I found a big one growing in cemetery down in Vienna. You'll still see them around, but from this kind of beginnings, they have been developed into this, again, huge, diverse collection of plants. Limelight that you see here, that comes out kind of this creamy white, very pale light green, was one of the first to hit it, more prolific in the flowering. Now these panicle hydrangeas, think of this as a sun-loving plant. This was mentioning, it can almost become an alternative to crepe myrtle. Its growing requirements, its growing conditions, pruning, it's treated very, very much like a crepe myrtle. It can be a large shrub, or it can be trained into a small but single stem type of tree. And there's more and more varieties being available all the time. Most of them playing around with different flower color. They're starting to introduce and get more pinks in there. We're getting small compact varieties. Again, think of this the same way you would think about a crepe myrtle. Now what we call the big leaf hydrangea, Hydrangea macrophylla, they're most part on the downhill side of their flowering. These are the ones that get, again, it looks like a softball on there. They will grow anywhere from this deep, almost red to a beautiful blue coloration in there. Much of this is influenced by the soil chemistry. What these hydrangeas will do is they will accumulate aluminum in their florets. And as they start to accumulate the aluminum in there, we start to bring out this kind of blue coloration. So it's a fun plant to mess around with, because I can alter the flower color by adding some aluminum sulfate, or I can bring out more of the pink by adding lime, which immobilizes the aluminum in there. These are plants that don't want to be out in the full hot sun. They like moist conditions. Ideal perfect spot is where we get morning sun for 2 or 3 hours, and then they're in the shade by noon. These are also, the deer eat on them. They get some leaf spot diseases. They can be finicky on their pruning, and they're susceptible to some winter kill. So it's not everybody's plant, but at the same time, it is everybody's plant, because there's nothing prettier than that hydrangea when it gets in bloom, when you can achieve these kind of colors, and there's a lot of other things that are out there. So the thing is, place them correctly where morning sun, afternoon shade, where they are in a bit sheltered environment. They like to stay kind of moist, not allowing them to sort of get too dry. And then they're kind of a mess when it comes to pruning. On these guys, the best way I can describe it, we refer to it, we say it flowers in old wood. The flower buds are going to be forming next month in August. Those buds carry through the winter months, and then they start to flower for you next summer. So in the winter, when this plant just looks like a bunch of dead sticks in there, those dead looking sticks are what carry your flower buds forward. So resist the urge. A lot of people want to go in and do their pruning, trim it back, shape it, clean it up in the winter, but in the process, they remove their flowers. So we got to kind of nurse it through the winter. I wait until about March. Then in March, I can better determine what conditions in. Then I can thin out the dead branches, maybe a few, but I got to be stingy with the pruning to preserve those flowers. Now, there's a bunch of them. They're called like endless summer or repeat flowering varieties. Not an exactly accurate kind of name on there because what they do is you can't really like deadhead them and have them rebloom. But what they will do is they will flower, like I said, off of last year's wood, but new shoots that come up are also capable of flowering later that summer. So you can get a longer, more extended bloom season out of those varieties. So if that didn't confuse you enough, because it is kind of, I look at this as interesting, not like difficult, but it's kind of fun to play around with and everything. That's kind of my little quick overview on hydrangeas. And again, this is just tip of the iceberg. There's many others. We don't have time to cover it all. So now I get to take a breather and I'm going to pass it back to Sally to deal with some questions.
All right, you're going to get a quick breather because we've got questions coming in about hydrangeas. So quick reminder to everybody, if we don't have time to answer your questions, please feel free to follow up with us after class. First question is about deer. This person loves their hydrangeas. The deer keep eating them. She wants to know if you have any tips for her to keep the deers from eating the hydrangeas, or if she should switch to something else, like would the Rose of Sharon be better? Any thoughts?
They're kind of like hydrangeas are just, there's nothing quite like them in the landscape. So to me, it's worth putting the effort of using deer repellents on it. That's one of the things that limits them, again, because they do well in that kind of woodsy shaded environment, summer flowers, all that good news, but the deer will browse on them. So we've had really good success with either Bobbex, that's Bobbex, or liquid fence. They are both, these are non-toxic. They just have very strong odors to them. You spray them on the plants directly. Depending on your feeding pressures, that might be most of our customers can do that once a month and it works. Sometimes it's a little more often, but it's worth putting that effort into it. Rose of Sharon's a full sun plant, so I don't know if I can really call that kind of an even exchange. And I'm drawing a blank on something that would give me summer blooms and part shade like that, that's deer resistant. So just make the commitment, get some deer repellent, just put on there once a month and see how that does.
Thanks, David. All right, next question is there a type of hydrangea that will tolerate wet better than another? If someone has a wet area they're trying to plant in.
Yeah, I'm just thinking through because the ones that I've shown you will all tolerate moist conditions. Now, I'm not saying flooded, not like saturated that's out there, but oddly enough, like the panicle hydrangeas, like I have over my shoulders here, and there's others. I have seen them used in rain gardens, which is a matter of periodic flooding, all the way to pretty hot sun drought tolerant. It's a pretty resilient plant that way. Our native hydrangea, they call it, I'm sure you remember the name of it, I think it is called wood hydrangea or something, Annabelle and Vincibelle, these are the ones. They are also do well in moist, semi-shade, part shade kind of environments that's in there, as well as the macrophyllus, the ones that have those pink and red flowers. They are also pretty moisture tolerant. So not wet, but moist is good. And even oak leaf hydrangea, which we left out of this, tolerates moisture pretty well. So that's a good group of plants to look at. I'd say the panicle hydrangea is probably the most moisture tolerant.
Okay. If someone wants to transplant their panicle hydrangea, or for that matter, I guess hydrangeas in general, I know they're different, but can they be transplanted easily, or is that something that would affect their health a lot?
I would really prefer to do that in the dormant season. Right now, in the middle of 90+ degrees, and I think we're getting more hot weather ahead, is not the time to be doing it, because I keep forgetting my names here. I keep thinking hydrangea macrophylla. I can't think of the common name, but the macrophyllus, they are a little bit marginal or a little susceptible to winter damage. So I'd rather wait and do that maybe in March when the really cold weather's behind us. But the others that we talked about, anytime during the dormant season, December, January, February, March, while they're resting, they transplant well. So go for it. Don't hesitate. But let's do it in their dormancy.
So do that during the dormant season. Perfect. Okay, we have a couple questions coming in about oak leaf hydrangeas, so I'm going to go to that real quick. First is, what time is best to fertilize oak leaf hydrangeas? And the next is oak leaf hydrangea one of our natives?
Oak leaf is probably my favorite of the collection. I just forgot, I didn't put it in here because it's not flowering in the summer, which is the topic is trying. Why did I leave that out? It's because they tend to flower kind of that late April, May time period, but it's one of my favorite plants. They bloom, like I said earlier, than these others that we were talking about, but great fall color, very coarse textured leaf. Again, many varieties are on there. As far as fertilizing, to me, the best time to fertilize them is in early spring, right when they're starting their growth out for the year. However, if you didn't, or you missed that, or you want to promote some more growth on, I have no issues at all with fertilizing now. If you are continuing to keep the plants watered, we don't fertilize drought stressed plants. And so that sometimes gets misconstrued saying, well, I can't fertilize now. No, you can fertilize, but that goes hand in hand with keeping it watered. And I think that was the question, right, about fertilizing?
Yeah, and then we had a question, I actually missed one. So we have, is oak leaf hydrangea native? And are oak leaf hydrangeas the same as the big leaf hydrangea?
Oak leaf hydrangea is not a Virginia native. It is a southeastern native. So you'll find them down Georgia, Tennessee, I think even into the Carolinas. So that's, for me, that's native enough. It definitely has a place in my garden. But if you're trying to be truly regional, it is not a Virginia or Northern Virginia native. It is different. That is, oak leaf is Hydrangea quercifolia because it has a leaf that looks like an oak tree. The flower looks kind of like a panicle hydrangea, but it is different. What we call big leaf hydrangea or Hydrangea macrophylla is that one that gets those pink and blue softball type flowers that are in bloom right now. Totally different plants, but related.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. Next question is about Annabelle hydrangeas. This person has Annabelle hydrangeas that are dying out, and she said the roots on the dead plants have white spores on them. Is this something that you've seen before, or should she maybe send us some photos or bring it in?
That's unusual. Because again, that is our native hydrangea. That's the one that's native to Virginia. The Hydrangea arborescens. So it does well. It's adapted. Again, we've got different colors and stuff. Annabelle's the one that gets the huge white flowers on there. So it's usually very, very reliable. I would probably say I'd like to look at the pictures because what you're describing to me, there is a root rot disease. It's called armillaria root rot that leaves a kind of a white mycelial mat on the roots. And we see that mostly on older forest trees like oaks and maples. It's very unusual to see that on a on hydrangea. So anyway, that's sad. I'd like to see some pictures and look at it. So it's possible. It certainly could be a pathogen that's got in there, but I would say that's unusual.
All right. Thank you so much. So to the person who asked that question, if you're interested in following up, feel free to hit reply on your confirmation email since you're on Zoom. That'll go to me and I'll make sure David gets it. All right. Next question. Are there any hydrangeas other than the panicle hydrangeas that will tolerate full sun?
Oak leaf hydrangea will tolerate, and I've seen them actually do quite well and thrive. Now, again, I think it's a little better if it gets some shelter and protection. But I think oak leaf's one that will adapt to full sun pretty well also. But like the big leaf hydrangeas, the Hydrangea arborescens, our native one, those I definitely don't want to put out in the sun. There's also a climbing hydrangea we didn't talk about because it blooms in spring. It's definitely a shade plant. So yeah, I'd say either the panicle or possibly even look at the oak leaf for a sunny location.
Okay, great, David. All right, we've got a couple questions left on hydrangeas, so I think we'll get through those. So these are both on climbing hydrangeas. The first question is there a good time to transplant an older climbing hydrangea that's not blooming in its current location? And then related to this is someone who's had a climbing hydrangea for about 8 years and it finally got a few flowers this year. So they want to know if that's normal and if they can get more flowers.
Yeah, climbing hydrangeas, they'll frustrate you a little bit because it's typical where they don't flower until they've had some time to mature and really get established. So like the customer's asking, or the watcher is talking about transplanting, keep in mind, hey, if you relocate this, you probably reset the clock and getting back to its flowering. The fact that you got a few flowers tells me, hooray, we're on the right track. Again, they will be setting their flower buds in the weeks ahead here as we move into late summer. So you might want to consider fertilizing with a bloom booster type fertilizer, which has a lot of phosphorus in there. Try to help, and I would do that as soon as possible, try to help assure good flowering, because the flowering decision is actually made as we go into late summer. And then those buds carry through and open for you next spring. And if you want to transplant that, it's best if we do that during the dormant season.
Okay. All right. Here's an interesting question. Do climbing hydrangeas damage the trees that they are climbing on?
Not directly. I mean, they do add a little bit of weight to it. It's not a super aggressive vine. Like there's vines like wisteria that will grow so aggressively, they climb up in the canopy and kind of overwhelm the trees. Or some that get so aggressive, they add a lot of additional weight to it. So they are competing with each other. So they're certainly not doing them any favors, but I've never seen climbing hydrangea get so big or aggressive that it was problematic. So I'd be okay with that.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. So we've got, that gets through our questions on the hydrangeas. So we have some more questions related to the crepe myrtles. I'm happy to jump back to that, or if you have anything else that you need to cover, we can move on to that.
You know what I'm going to do, just because I'm tired of talking about crepe myrtles and hydrangeas. I lied when I said it's your show. I brought these guys in because I've had 2 people come into the clinic the other day, and I'm sure you guys, I've been fixated with blossom end rot on tomatoes. I realize this has nothing to do with talking about trying to see, but blossom end rot, many of you know this is a physiological disorder that will happen. It's not a disease, but basically it causes the bottom of the fruit on here where it just doesn't develop fully. And the thing that drives me crazy about this, because this has been around forever, it's nothing new. We pretty much believe or understand this is as this fruit's enlarging, as it's been pollinated, as it's expanding, if it doesn't get a supply of calcium down here, then these cells don't develop and the bottom side of it rots out. The thing that will drive you crazy is we make sure there's calcium in the soil, right? That's always the first question. A lot of people growing plants in pots and containers, and if you don't add calcium, if you don't put lime or gypsum or some calcium in there, then that's the obvious starting spot. But the plants these came off of, and the other people are bringing into me, they have put lime or they've put calcium containing fertilizers. We know calcium's in there. So the other part of that question is, well, the water, because the calcium is the plant's transpiring as it's moving water up from the roots up to the top of the plant and migrating into the fruit. So you have to have a steady, consistent water in there to help move the nutrients into it. So if you hit a dry spell, if the plant dries out, then that can disrupt the flow of calcium into it. If you look at it and say, well, but I'm consistent with my watering. This is a process, this is what I've been going through this morning. And then I look at it, it's like, well, I'm digging further into this. Well, okay, and then they start saying if you're really high in nitrogen and potassium, then those nutrients can interfere with the plant's ability to absorb the calcium. And then there's always, we can blame the weather under extremely hot temperatures. So anyway, this is on my mind. I don't have answers. It's the whole thing of, hey, this is the art and science of gardening. We make sure the plant has calcium. We try to maintain consistent soil moisture, avoid dry spells, don't over fertilize, and keep our fingers crossed that we don't have too many days above 90 degrees. And if everything goes right, we don't really have this. But anyway, that's a side note. I wanted to talk to you about it because it's been on my mind all morning, and there, we're done. Anything else, Sally, for questions or anybody?
Well, it's 2:45 now. So what I would say is, if you guys have questions that didn't get answered, actually, David, I do have one question that I think we can get to really quick. We had a couple people ask about drench. Does that have an effect on the butterfly and the bees? How do you prevent that from affecting the bugs if it does?
Yeah, that's why I keep saying I'd much rather come in and have you talk to us about it, because this does make its way, it migrates up into every part of the plant. That means it makes its way into the flowers, it makes its way into the nectar and the pollen. So specifically concerned with bees, because it is more toxic to bees than it is butterflies that's in there. So it becomes a dilemma of where I don't like using this. If you have a pest like that bark scale, you're trying to make sort of balanced decisions. That's why I say if it's something like aphids and we can use soaps, oils, ladybugs, that's always going to be my plan A. This is kind of as a last resort, and that's a conversation I'd like to have with you one-on-one, because there is risk to the pollinators when we go that route. So
All right.
that's my last resort, and we got to balance that with what else is going on in the environment around us.
Got it. All right. Thanks, David. So just a quick note to everybody. If you have follow-up questions, or if you weren't able to get your question answered today, please feel free. If you are on Zoom, you can hit reply on your registration emails. That goes to me. And I'll make sure that David gets your question so that we can follow up with you, get you some more information. For those of you who are on Zoom, so I know a lot of you attend our 12 noon classes. We don't follow up after our virtual plant clinics with recordings, but they are available. So if you would like a recording of this class, whether you're on Facebook, which actually the Facebook becomes available on Facebook, or if you're on Zoom, you can email me for that as well. And we'd be happy to get you a copy of the recording. And if you have any other questions, please, again, just feel free to contact us. So thank you so much for joining us today. David, thank you as always for covering these topics with us. Do you have anything you'd like to close with before we wrap up?
Just a little reminder, I'll be back in a couple of weeks. I think I want to talk about fall vegetables, so put it on your calendar.
All right. Fall vegetables. Can't believe we're getting to that part of the year. Thank you so much, David. All right, everybody, have a great day.